Hi, everyone. I'm really pleased that you decided to join me to take a look at U.S. history. We try to take a look at U.S. history from a variety of different angles, try to identify the story behind the story. Sometimes we try to look at the odd things that have happened, and certainly examine the personalities that have made the American experience so unique in all the history of the world. In particular, we take a look at the U.S. Constitution, this wonderful document that has governed this country for well over 200 years. And we try to understand some of the complications and some of the problems that we face as a nation, day by day, year by year, month by month. In any event, I hope you're enjoying this and that you come back often because I will keep repeating these and posting them to YouTube so that you can relive the experience if you want to do it more than once. And I hope you do. Anyway, welcome and enjoy the presentations. In any event, we did the first half of the history of medicine last time. And it was really pretty much based on superstition and practices and witch doctory and so forth. But now, all of a sudden, we get to the point where there is the Renaissance and the rebirth of thinking, or the birth of thinking, if you in a sense. And so we have actually then the science comes to the rescue, and we have the scientific method introduced. So what happens as a result of that? So we have the Renaissance, which is considered to be the rebirth of everything, but the rebirth of science in this case. And we have the actual advent of medical schools, pretty primitive medical schools, but at least they had the idea of studying them. And now, for the first time, they begin to actually, in some places, study the body by dissection. Matter of fact, they even stole corpse in order to dissect them and to learn how the body is put together and how it operates. During this period, we have great thinkers like Leonardo da Vinci, who studied and recorded the anatomy of the body. And I always thought this illustration on the lower right is quite interesting because our body, from tip of our finger to the tip of our finger, is the same as from the tip of our toe to the top of our head. We are symmetrical in that sense, and he's the one who designed or diagrammed that rather effectively. This was also, now we have the invention of the printing press, and so suddenly all these ideas that people have can become much more readily available. Here's a picture of a monk copying books on a monastery prior to the Renaissance. That was a very slow, very tedious process, and only the very, very wealthy had books at all. But now all of a sudden, the common man could have books as well. So Francis Bacon is considered to be the first to formalize the concept of a true scientific method, but he didn't do so alone. He had the ideas of previous thinkers like Copernicus and Galileo, who influenced him tremendously. People began to trust doctors more as they proved that science could help to cure them. People moved away from using the traditional cures of the wise men and the shamans and so forth. William Harvey, 1578 to 1657, he articulated what the pumping heart and circulation is all about. And I don't know why I did this, but not so many days ago, a month ago maybe now, I thought, okay, how many times has my heart pumped since the day I was born? And how many do I hope it will beat until my time expires? And it's mind-blowing how many beats this little organ in your chest makes in a lifetime. It's a remarkable organ. I encourage you to do that sometime. Just do the multiplication, 60 times a minute rather, and times 24 hours a day, and so forth. Now, one of the great inventions of all time is the microscope. It's considered to have been invented by Zacharias Janssen in 1590, he and his father working together. And then it was later Antoine von Leeuwenhoek who first began to look through this microscope and to see the first bacteria. And therefore, he becomes known as the father of microbiology. And so finally, doctors were able to see these funny little things called bacteria and germs. And this would lead them to other discoveries of what really caused diseases, and then later, following that, better ways to cure them. Van Leeuwenhoek, considered to be the father of microbiology. Our own Benjamin Franklin is a great inventor. Among the medical things he did is he invented bifocals. Frankly, he had trouble, like many of us do with advancing age, in seeing properly. And so he put two pieces of glass together, and all of a sudden we have the invention of bifocals. And of course, he is also known to have really identified what electricity is all about and countless other inventions. A very brilliant man, one of the most brilliant of our founding fathers, as far as I'm concerned. Now, we've had smallpox with us through all of mankind, and there were early ways to cure to cure smallpox, but they were not systematic or universal. But Edward Jenner in 1796, he actually scientifically develops the vaccination for smallpox. And so it's virtually eliminated in the world eventually. A terrible scourge. Between 15 and 30% of people who become infected with smallpox will die. Ignaz Semmelweis, he discovers the cause of childhood fever, and he instituted the importance of hand washing. And ironically, he dies from a cut he received during an autopsy that was being performed. René Laennec is considered to have invented the stethoscope in 1816, kind of a basic instrument, but terribly important in listening to what's going on in the human body, especially what's going on with our heart and lungs. Florence Nightingale developed what is considered to be the first school of nursing, started during the Crimean War in 1853-56. Made nursing an honorable profession, which it had not been up till that point. Famously, Clara Barton established the American Red Cross in 1881. This fellow, Louis Pasteur, is the one who discovered that microorganisms cause disease, and he's responsible for the universal pasteurization from 1863 forward, and it's essential to preserving food. Joseph Lister is the first doctor to use antiseptic during an operation to prevent infection. He found an effective antiseptic in carbolic acid as a wound dressing in 1863. Of course, you can't even imagine using surgery today. In those days, before that, they didn't wash their hands. All they would do is deal with the body. They'd do surgeries without any cleaning and so forth. Lister performs the first successfully uses this method in 1865, and then he publishes a little later his cases so that then that information is distributed throughout everyone. Robert Koch advances scientific microbiology. And it's about 1930 that they invent the electron microscope. And so then they really make leaps forward in microbiology. William Röntgen discovered X-rays in 1895. Can you imagine diagnosing bodies today for illnesses or injuries without having X-rays available? Sigmund Freud famously had the studies of the basis of psychology and psychiatry. He writes his book, Studies in Hysteria, in 1895. Alexander Fleming is considered to have discovered penicillin in 1928 and did so by observing what he saw happening in his laboratory with the growth of mold. Famous Jonas Salk discovered a killed polio virus vaccine in 1955. And many of you will remember, and perhaps even some of you had polio. It didn't all kill people, make them crippled. Sometimes you could have polio as simply a very bad cold kind of a thing. But polio was the scourge of the late 40s and 50s when I was a small boy. Terrified everyone, and there were always epidemics every summer. And then after 1955, it went away. Even another great advancement, Albert Sabin used a live polio vaccine in the late 1950s, which was very easy to administer. And so polio is virtually eliminated in the world, although there's been some resurgence in a few places in recent years. In 2000, we have the first draft of the human genome. Its finalized version is released 3 years later. And so what is a genome? The genome is organized into 22 paired chromosomes, termed autosomes, and so forth. That's a couple of paired chromosomes in male and female. Though we won't get into all of the detail there, but making this discovery was a great breakthrough for science. In 2006, a mini liver the size of a small coin is generated from human cord blood stem cells by doctors in the UK. Scientists discover how to use human skin cells to create embryonic stem cells. What are stem cells? Stem cells are the body's master cell. They're the body's raw materials, cells from which all other cells with specialized functions are generated. Under the right conditions in the body or a laboratory, stem cells divide to form more cells called daughter cells. These daughter cells become either new stem cells or specialized cells. We call that differentiation, with a more specific function such as blood cells, brain cells, heart muscle cells, or bone cells. It's a phenomenal technology and understanding. No other cells in the body have the natural ability to generate new cell types. Why is there such an interest in stem cells? Stem cell studies help us to increase the understanding of how diseases occur by watching stem cells mature into cells in bones, heart muscle, nerves, and other organs and tissue. They generate healthy cells to replace cells affected by disease. In other words, this is called regenerative medicine. Stem cells can be guided into becoming specific cells to regenerate and repair tissues damaged by disease. So who benefits? People who might benefit include spinal cord injuries, type 1 diabetes, Parkinson's, ALS, Alzheimer's, heart disease, stroke, burns, cancer, osteoarthritis, and many, many, many more. It can also be used to test new drugs for safety and effectiveness. Before using drugs in people, researchers can use the stem cells to test the drugs for safety and quality. Why is there a controversy about using embryonic stem cells? Embryonic stem cells are obtained from early stage embryos, a group of cells that forms when eggs are fertilized with sperm into an in vitro fertilization clinic. When they use a in vitro fertilization process, what they do with a woman is they stimulate them through various procedures so that they release, in theory, many eggs at the same time. Sometimes 5, sometimes 10, sometimes 20. And then they are fertilized. Well, you do not take all 20, if that happened to be the number, and implant them. You may take only 1 or 2 at the most and implant them in the mother. And so the rest are left there, already fertilized, but not to be used. Now, because human embryonic stem cells are extracted from human embryos, Several questions and issues have been raised about the ethics of embryonic stem cell research. Very controversial. The National Institutes of Health created guidelines for this in 2009. They define embryonic stem cells and how they may be used in research and include recommendations for the donation of embryonic stem cells. Also, the guidelines state that embryonic stem cells from embryos created by the in vitro fertilization can be used only when the embryo is no longer needed. Where do these embryos come from? The embryos being used in embryonic stem cell research come from eggs that were fertilized at in vitro fertilization clinics, but never implanted in women's uteruses. Stem cells are donated with informed consent from donors. The stem cells can live and grow in special solutions in test tubes or petri dishes in laboratories, and they can be effectively frozen for a long period of time. About it. The artificial kidney. 2014, the FDA approved the first human clinical trials in the United States for a wearable artificial kidney designed by blood purification technologies, and that was out in California. And it's not perfected yet, but they are continuing to make it smaller and smaller. And so eventually the artificial kidney will be a practical device. So far, it's still too big to be totally implanted. In 2015, in March, DNA from an extinct woolly mammoth is spliced into that of an elephant. Scientists then successfully used the revived DNA to sequence the mammoth's complete genome. As of date, no viable mammoth tissue or its intact genome has been found to attempt cloning. According to one research team, a mammoth cannot be recreated, but the team can try to eventually grow in an artificial womb a hybrid elephant with some woolly mammoth traits. Amazing what they're trying to do. In 2016, the success of a first-time experimental surgery will determine future availability for U.S. cancer patients and veterans with injuries to the pelvic region. On May 8th of 2016, a man named Thomas Manning was the first man to receive a penis transplant at the Massachusetts General Hospital. And he recovered very well, and as far as I could tell in my research, he's still doing very well. Since 2018, 4 patients have successfully received penis transplants from institutions around the world. Johns Hopkins was the 4th successful penis transplant and the first ever penis and scrotum transplant in the world. There's hope for us all, guys. The first successful penis transplant was in South Africa in 2014, followed by Massachusetts General in 2016 and South Africa again in 2017. Then we have to mention nanomedicine. It involves the application of nanoparticles. Nano means small. Currently under development involves the use of manufactured nanorobots to make repairs at the cellular level. These go into our bloodstream and go wherever the problem in the body is. Stem cell research, as I've already alerted to, tremendous promise to help us understand and treat our whole range of diseases. Personalized medicine. Medical practices, decisions, interventions, and or products being tailored to the individual patients based on their predicted response or risk of disease. Augmented reality, the digital contact lens, patented by Google, aims to change the course of diabetes management by measuring blood glucose levels from tears. Artificial intelligence, creating digital cells based on neurological information. It means we could upload our minds to a computer and live on a digital form. Sounds far-fetched, but we live in crazy times. Cyborgs, cybernetic organisms. Cyborgs will be able to restore function or enhance abilities due to the integration of some artificial component or technology. Medical 3D printing will destroy the redesign and whole pharmaceutical world, but regulation will be a huge challenge. Bionic ears and simpler organs will be printed at the patient's bedside. Gamifying behavior change. Adherence and compliance pills as a pill bottle that glows blue when a medication dose should be taken and red when a dose is missed, or tiny digestible sensors that can be placed in pills that can transmit pill digestion data due to the physicians and family members. New diseases like virtual PTSD. New types of diseases will appear due to the excessive use of virtual reality solutions in gaming and other industries, including healthcare. For example, virtual post-traumatic stress disorder and addiction. Real-time diagnostics. With the intelligent surgical eye knife, the vaporized smoke is analyzed by a mass spectrometer to detect the chemicals in the biological sample to identify whether the tissue is malignant in real time. So while the doctor's actually performing the surgery, he'll be able to know if he's dealing with cancer or something benign. Holographic data input. No hardware will be needed to add data to a laptop, as screens and keyboards will be projected on the wall or table. Only small projectors will be needed, while the data will be stored exclusively in the cloud. Crowdsourcing through social media. Social media has the potential to become a huge mind machine, making it possible to transmit, share, crowdsource, and store medical pieces of information, either for e-patients or medical professionals. Multifunctional radiology. One multifunctional machine will be able to detect plenty of medical problems, biomarkers, and symptoms at once. Remote surgery. Present day, surgeons already perform some surgeries by controlling robotic arms from a nearby console. The idea, why can't surgeons do the same thing from further away? The advantages, robotic surgery expected to cut deaths from abdominal aortic aneurysm surgery from 10% to less than 3%. World-class surgeons will now become more accessible, even in war zones, from anywhere in the world. The next step, improving connectivity and reducing transmission delays. Genome customized medications. Present day, more efficient methods of sequencing the human genome are utilized every day. The idea is that medication can be diagnosed or even custom made based on an individual's genome. The advantages, diseases can be predicted and prevented decades before they appear. Replacement of trial and error prescriptions with safer, more effective drugs and dosages. What comes next? Overcoming the challenges of finding specific genes affecting drug response. And there's scientists working on all of these kinds of things all the time. More widespread pharma genomics expected in the next 4 years. Catheter-based renal denervation. Present day, named the #1 medical innovation for 2012 for the Cleveland Clinic. The idea is that 40-minute procedure reduces blood pressure, controls resistant hypertension, and possibly helps treat insulin-resistant chronic kidney disease and heart failure. The advantages, 1 in 3 US adults has hypertension. #1 risk factor for death worldwide. 30% reduction in cardiovascular mortality. Next step, the trials with more patients and longer follow-up are required. Nanomedicine, I mentioned a little bit ago. Some drug delivery nanotechnologies are already in use. The idea is fabricating nanotechnology or controlling matter at a molecular scale can provide diagnoses, target treatments for a broad range of diseases. The advantages, target tumor cells without the side effects of chemotherapy. remove barriers to the circulatory system, and repair damaged tissues. Next step, machines that can build nanoprobes are still 10 to 20 years away, but drug delivery nanomedicine is farther along. New cancer detection methods. So far, a present sports bra in development can detect breast cancer up to 6 years before a tumor is visible. Cancer detection systems that find cancer earlier and don't even require a doctor. Now, reduce the need for painful diagnostic procedures such as biopsies. Handheld optical scan can identify 98% of melanomas. Next, a breath test for lung cancer is 9 years away. Urine tests for bladder cancer are within the next 4 years. Wireless body monitoring. Present day, the FCC announced new measures to promote wireless health technology in September. The idea of monitoring the body wirelessly helps doctors and patients intervene more quickly. Advantages: wireless radio pills log when a patients take their medicine. Blood pressure, blood sugar, calorie, and weight data are used as a tool for healthier living. Wireless patches alert women when they're fertile. Next, the cost is the biggest factor holding this research back. And all of these things are expensive, by the way. Bone regeneration. Instead of grafting bone from the pelvis, spine surgeons are applying bone growth factor to accelerate healing. Stem cells and bone growth factor are a new means of bone replacement. It's an alternative to bone fusions, 30 to 40% of which don't heal. It reduces the risk of virus transmission and rejection from cadaver harvested bone grafts. Next, biological joint replacement is still in the testing stages. New synthetic bone graft materials are appearing on the market, being invented all the time. Bariatric surgery for type 2 diabetes, and some of you will find this relevant. Bariatric surgery helps patients lose weight. Patients have been rid of type 2 diabetes even before they left the hospital post-surgery. Advantages: reduces the risk of diabetes, induced heart attack, stroke, blindness, and other illnesses. Next step, experts recommend earlier surgery for patients with poorly managed type 2 diabetes. Neuromodulation device for headaches. Available in Europe. Surgically implanted device stimulates a nerve bundle behind the nose to fight headaches. Can reduce the cluster and migraine headache pain in 5 to 10 minutes. 68% of the patients responded to neuromodulation therapy in European testing. The FDA has approved investigational use in the US, and so it'll probably soon be available generally. Donor lung washing procedure. Approved in Europe and Canada. The idea is ex vivo lung perfusion, repairs and assesses damaged donor lungs in 4 to 6 hours. The advantage: 100,000 Americans are on the lung transplant list. It could make 40% of previously rejected donor lungs suitable for transplant. Undergoing a major clinical trial in the US. So new approaches to medical care are being discovered every year. Notice the one on the left where they're devising a way for somebody who's paralyzed from the waist down to be able to walk, and artificial hearts, and all kinds of marvelous things are on the horizon. People are taught more about wellness and learn more about healthcare because we are still responsible for our own healthcare. We need doctors, and doctors do well, and technology does well, but ultimately we need to be attuned into our own health and to seek help for the problems that we see that we're having, and seek it early, because all problems are easier to solve if you try to solve them early rather than wait. And so that is the end. But I will also say that you need to stay well on your own, and you need to be very grateful that you are living in this time of science. Not so long ago, I was doing some research on people from the 17th and 18th and even 19th century, and I kept running into deaths when they were 55, 49, 50, 51, maybe even getting to 60. It was very rare when these historical characters lived on into their 80s and 90s. Yes, they did occasionally, but it was fairly rare. Today, science has allowed you, once you have reached the age of 80, for example, you already have a life expectancy that nears 90. And if you get to 85, you have a life expectancy that extends on into your 90s. So we live in a time when marvelous things have happened. And as you can see, if even a few of the things that I mentioned today come true, it will be, many of us will be around for quite a while. And I hope that I'm one of them.